Season's greetings from the Rams Review podcast. We're here right in the middle of Christmas and New Year, and we've got two games to talk about. Unfortunately, not a lot of Christmas cheer from a Derby County's perspective, but we'll dive into the two games. Joining me on this very festive morning, we've got Jack Bryan. Jack, good morning, mate.
Morning, mate. Does anyone know what day it is? As far as I'm concerned, it's match day plus one. But you know, as you say, not much festive cheer, but we'll try and inject a little bit, won't we?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, Mr. Chris Holtz here. Chris, good morning.
Good morning, gentlemen. Just for your information, Jack, it's a Tuesday, and I know that because I've got to put the bins out tomorrow morning.
Yeah, never really know what days what, do we, in between. But alas, we have football to talk about. Two away games to round off now, 2025 for Derby County before two home games to start 2026, which we will touch on a little bit later in the podcast. So we'll start with Boxing Day. A game that, going into it, Birmingham away, they've not lost at home for quite some time. And for about 30 minutes, Jack, things were almost going to plan as Derby County seemed to have found that little bit of magic away from home. And then obviously we have not one, but two red cards to talk about. But the first one, of course, from Derby's Joe Ward. But before that, a very, very nice break from Derby, as we've kind of come to expect now. Derby counter-attack away from home after what had been a bit of a solid start from Birmingham without really doing too much. Um, that's the first talking point. Lovely ball from Ward. Brewster, we're starting to see a little bit out of him now. Now he's building up his fitness, and that man, Big Pat, up front yet again. And I thought that was I thought that was quite a tidy little finish and a tidy little move from Derby.
Yeah, it's a really good sweeping counter attack. Who says Route One can't be aesthetically pleasing? Joe Ward hits that ball from inside his own defensive third all the way to Brewster. It's a great kind of first time cross, and Adjaman does his job with a lovely little diving header in off the post after missing probably an easier chance a few minutes earlier. So Derby are in a strong position. They've done what they need to do because Birmingham have got Derby playing some weird game of piggy in the middle with 11v11 really. But but then Joe Ward, yeah, it's such a frustrating one because if he hadn't already been booked, that's a decent yellow card to take. Uh, and that first yellow is so innocuous. Just kicking the ball away is just unnecessary, isn't it? You just don't need to do it. And it puts Derby's backs further against the wall. And yeah, of course they would be punished for that in the second half. But yeah, it's just a frustrating one given the manner of it. And I also then do wonder what difference could he have made at the King Power last night as well. So I'm sure we can come on to that as well. But yes, it's a great goal from Derby. Adjuran really coming into form, but undone by that moment of madness really from Joe Ward.
Yeah, and like Jack's just said, Chris, two yellow cards. I mean, yeah, okay, the second one, it is a yellow card. That first one, I appreciate he's got it for kicking the ball away, but I mean, I've actually watched that two or three times, and I'm not. I mean, I'd love to see what the rule set these days says about what is deemed kicking away a football, but it's not like he's booted it into the stand. He's sort of jogged with it 3 yards, and he's got once the whistle's blown, and he's got a yellow card. So I think a little bit harsh, but I think it just highlights the we something that we already know. Joe Ward not necessarily the greatest at defending, and it's obviously it's a clumsy second one. When if you're gonna if you're gonna do something like that, you do it higher up the pitch, and I get you're still probably going to get your yellow card. But the moment that he actually sort of fumbles into Roberts, and again, there's not lots of contact, but of course, he's all any sort of touch is going to go down. Is just at the same point where it looked like at least one centre off was kind of set, and maybe that contact wasn't needed.
Yeah, just going back to the first booking, and I'll compare it to obviously, as you know, I officiate basketball, as I've said many times on the pod, but it's a delay game card, and we have it in basketball. We have a warning called a delay of game warning, and it can be really innocuous where a player can throw the ball will go to the basket. The attacking player will catch the ball innocuously because it's reaction and hand it to the opposite team, and he'll get a warning for it because they're not allowed to touch the ball. It's the same in football. As soon as the whistle is blown, they are not allowed to touch the ball. And I know it's pedantic, and I know it's a silly rule, but unfortunately, it is in the FA rule. So Ward knew the cause. The second one is just silly. I don't think he needs to get that close to him, to be honest. I don't think that the position is as dangerous as Ward thinks it is. There is cover. I guess that the referee has been given no choice. I always worry when Ward has got his back turned and he's running back towards our goal. He's never been the most confident of fullbacks, as Jack rightly said. He was missed in the second game, which we'll come to. I just find that Joe Ward has this in his game. There's a bit of naivety about him. And it's okay turning around and saying on his socials, I apologise, I'll learn from it. But the question is, guys, will he? Because I don't think this is the first time he's been at this rodeo with silly challenges and yellow cards. And it's obviously set him back from the form that he was in. And now it gives a dilemma going forward that do you wedge him back into the team or do you go with what you had last night?
Yeah, just to comment on that, because in terms of these sorts of bookings, I know there was an incident last night. I think it was Abdul Fatawu who appeared to kick the ball away somewhat at one point, and it comes back to something that Graham Scott, former Premier League referee, said. He came into the uni a couple of months back, and he was talking about people want consistency and common sense. You can only really have one. So if you're going to be consistent, then and give that, which is in the rules, then you've got to be giving it on all those scenarios. The common sense approach last night in what was somewhat of a derby, albeit not the derby as we would see it, um, is to let all things go. But I think that does then feed into the frustration when that's not given in all the scenarios, doesn't it? So it's an interesting one.
Yeah, and obviously, then Derby managed to graft the way through to half time with a 1-0 lead. And I mean, it was obviously always going to be then a very different second half. But for again, Birmingham had sort of had the ball and looked pretty with it in front of Derby's back line, but nothing great of note, Jack, in that second half. And then obviously we make the changes. We bring Nelson on. Danny Batt again had a very, very solid game at the back. Thought Nelson came in, did well. And yet again, we've really dug in there, and then we've been undone by obviously a set piece. And the big question is it a foul? Is it handball? Should the goal? I mean, it definitely goes over the line, so I don't think we can argue that point. But from that, should that goal really stand?
Yeah, I mean, there's also a question over whether it looks offside or not. And I mean, I think if you're going to call for that and that should be spotted, then you've got to accept the downsides that would come with VAR. I don't think that gets spotted otherwise. I mean, it is just a bit of a scramble, and I guess credit to Jack Robinson for getting it over that goal line. But yeah, it's a really frustrating one for Derby to concede, and yeah, certainly questions because it did look as though it might have been offside. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah, I thought it was offside. I'll be straight with you. I think championship refereeing and officiating in general is under the scrutiny. And the call outs of VAR for this level has to be now assessed and looked at. I think there's too much um, at stake for these games to not have that support from above. Um, I just find Derby's defending though in general at the moment quite naive. I think there's certain scenarios that are so preventable. And I don't know how much more a coaching staff from the sideline can instruct because once you cross the white line, guys, as we all know, you're in the laps of your players and their mentality to assess situations and resolve them. And I just think that certain scenarios are being put in front of us that we're just not dealing with. And I think that this is something that's now becoming a little bit repetitive and begs the question, going back to what we spoke about before in the previous pods. I think leadership is missing somewhat. And when the armband goes around to various people, like it changed last night twice, it was a different armband for the Birmingham game. There's no consistency, there's no understanding. So the sooner we get a consistency of leadership out there and understanding back in the team, the better.
Yeah, I would agree with that. The defence at the moment, well, it's not just at the moment. We've kept 4 clean sheets all season. I think that is a pretty obvious thing that John needs to try and rectify. However, he may do that. I think, for my opinion on the goal, I do think it's an handball, but obviously one of the cliches of football is your luck kind of evens itself out over a season. Well, for me, luck kind of evened itself out over that game, because I would argue Birmingham probably should have had at least one, if not two, penalties. Because Matt Clark, and that's somebody I want to go on to talk about, because his form just seems to have fallen off a cliff a little bit. And or is it just that we're starting to realise now why some of the top boys who've had him in the past didn't fancy him, because there's something about his game I've looked into more so just recently, and yeah, I'm not sure at the moment on Clark, but he's all over once or twice, and we say it all the time, and we see it all the time, shirt pulls and just general holding, and I think it's always going to have, while the refs are more lenient with it and don't give enough fouls for it, it's going to keep happening. But I mean, at some point, there's going to have to be something done, because clearly players are going to, the dark arts, if you want to call it that, they're going to do whatever they can to get away and toe the line of the law. But it's just silly. It's clumsy defending, and especially in a game like that, when I actually thought Derby played all right on Boxing Day, with 11 against 11, Derby could have easily have held on to that 1-0 lead. It could have still finished 1-1, and I don't think we could have walked away from that particularly disappointed. But like, I think we've mentioned it before, Chris, you've certainly mentioned it, just certain phases of game in the game where players have just got to, it's just concentration and decision making just needs to be a little bit better for me. But to round off that Birmingham game, as we say, then at that point they go 1-1. And Jack, let's face it, you see it so many times. You're down to 10 men. The home team have just pulled back level. Derby could have easily have lost that game. And so, we've got to give credit where credit's due, helped by some fantastic defending from Birmingham centre half, who decided to kick Adams's head instead of the football, by the looks of it, and receive obviously a straight red by the looks of it. I looked. It said on Sky Sports that it was 2 yellows. I'm not so sure. I thought it was straight red. And then something that John Eustace mentioned in his press conference after, in his comments after to the radio and what have you, he thought he probably should have gone 10, 15 minutes earlier. And that then obviously evens it out. And I still think even when Derby were down to 10 men, I wouldn't necessarily say Birmingham looked twice as good as Derby or anything like that. There was not a great deal else in it. And Derby were breaking and getting chances and getting opportunities. We've had a couple. Vyman's had one flash wide, and there was opportunity. So I know that's all hearsay, and who knows what could have happened. But in the end, I suppose a point about a fair on reflection, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean the incident you refer to, I think was about the 69th minute, 'cause that's when Eustace got booked. So I think it was that moment he was wrought up enough by it to earn himself a booking, which doesn't happen that often. I can't remember if it's happened yet in his Derby managerial career, to be honest. But he's someone who doesn't get overly animated on the touchline, someone who doesn't get uh, angry on the touchline that much. So yeah, it was definitely a moment that got to him a little bit, and I think rightly so. I think you know was that probably yellow card worthy? Yes, and then as you say, it does end up being a straight red card. You've got two moments there really in stoppage time, because you've got the fact that Adams has been clattered in the back of the head, and you've got Sondre Langas sat bleeding from his head as well after another tussle a moment before as well. So it did, it did really kind of come to a head, no pun intended, at that point. But yeah, you do feel that if the last 25, well, nearly half hour with all the stoppage time that was played was 10v10, again, maybe things could have been different. As you say, it's all hearsay. We are guessing, but it is a frustration for Derby. The only other frustration in that respect, and I need to get this off my chest because I had enough of this watching him for Celtic over the years do this to Aberdeen, is Furuhashi's well, he was a little bit irritating, wasn't he, with setting up all those goal kicks for Zetterstrom. Yeah, just needed to get that one off my chest. Been storing that one up for years.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Certainly like to put himself about a bit. There's no two ways about that. In all fairness, for the whole game, Chris, it was actually it was quite a physical encounter, wasn't it? And there was and I know you look at that and say, well, you see two red cards, but it wasn't. Obviously, they come at completely sort of different times in the game. But I thought it was a decent competitive championship game of football. Certainly one that if you was a neutral wasn't a poor watch. And same question to you, Chris, as Jack. It's I suppose coming out of St Andrews, again football cliches, a point on the road, it's never a bad point. And I think Derby were worth the point. Were they good enough on the day for three? I would probably argue no. But again, when you're the away side, you don't always get the best of the contest and always pick up 3 points. So I'd say a point pretty fair.
Yeah, I'm disappointed with the goal conceded. As we alluded to, I think there's so many mistakes in there that could have been prevented. I'll put my teeth back in. It's very early morning. I'm sort of pondering over my words there. I look at the stats of the game, and like you said, we had a magnificent second half. The defending by Danny Bart in particular was just everything that I alluded to previously: leadership, understanding, you know, some stability. See, what he hasn't got in pace, he's got up in his head. His understanding of a football match is second to none. He's been there at the highest level for many years in the championship, and there's no better person we have in our squad than him probably to come in and resolve that. I wouldn't have put, although Sanderson couldn't play against his parent club, I wouldn't put Sanderson in the same sort of battle to defend your back line for 55 plus minutes. I don't think Sanderson is that kind of player. I agree with you about Clark. I think his form is dipping. He looks tired to me. It looks as if the 2 games a week are starting to get to him. I don't know if it's his issue that's recurring again or something, just purely down to, like I said, form and confidence. The only thing that I will say about the game is that we could have got a stranglehold of the game in the first half, and we are not taking opportunities when they come along. We are doing odd pieces of brilliance at the moment, which are keeping us in games. And again, we'll come to the Leicester game. I'm all for that, don't get me wrong, but these odd pieces of magic, like the goal at Birmingham, etc., need to be more consistent and need to be regular. We seem to go to Aubameyang for 15, 20 minutes and then he won't see the ball for 15, 20 minutes. And I find that really strange. I also think that we're getting to the point now where Brereton Diaz, to me, needs to come out of the team. I don't see what he's bringing to the actual elements of what Eustace is trying to do. I don't know if there's a clause in his contract. I have no idea. But we move on from Birmingham. It was a good point. You look at the table, we're both there or thereabouts in the same position. They've spent a few quid. We've spent a few quid. Both teams had serious injury issues for that game. So, yeah, I'll take a point.
And then we roll into obviously last night's game at the King Power, looking to avenge that pretty dismal 3-1 defeat at Pride Park earlier on this month. And the big question going into it was obviously, would Sanderson come straight back in, or would Bat or Nelson get the nod after their heroics on Boxing Day? And alas, obviously looking at Joe Ward sending off as well, I had a suspicion that Langas would be moved out to the right, and then yeah, it was a toss up of which defender came in. But he reverted back, Chris, to Sanderson. What can you say what's been working when you've only kept 4 clean sheets all season? But still, he comes straight back in, and within 5 minutes, Derby have done exactly what they've done so many times this season. Started well for 2 or 3 minutes, and then basically just let somebody waltz down the right hand side without putting any sort of rough challenge in any sort of anything like that. And basically, Leicester have just danced their way to a 1-0 lead. Obviously, luckily, Derby managed to fire back pretty quickly, because if they hadn't, it could have been a cricket score the way that game had started. But Derby had managed to, and again, a very nice, well worked goal. Brewster getting on the score sheet. A crazy opening 10 minutes.
It was crazy, and Mr. Reed does what he always does, scores against Derby County. I think that's back-to-back games that he scored. Again, as I alluded to previously, there's just no concentration. These are just basics. That goal should not happen so early in the game. I understand if that goal happens in the 75th, 80th minute, where you've had substitutions have been made, people are tired, they're cramping up. But after 6 minutes, Jason, really, are we that open? It's so naive, and it's nothing to do with coaching. It's nothing to do with formation. It's to do with concentration and naivety. And some of these players need to take more responsibility with these kind of situations. I looked at the stats this morning before we came on air for this game, and it was a dull game. Let's be completely honest. Other than the first 10 minutes, it was really dull. But like you said, Derby got back into it with again a good work goal, and I'll pass that back on to Jack to go through that. But yeah, I'm getting, to be honest, Jason, I'm getting a bit frustrated and sick and tired of talking about our defensive naiveties. We've had 4 clean sheets now only this season. That isn't going to get us into the top 10.
No, no, it's not at all, is it? And like you say, it was a bit of a dull game. Um, I actually thought I was I thought it at the time, and then I kind of thought about it again after the game, and I'm not sure if I'm right or wrong in this, but Jack, I'll be interested to get your opinions. I actually thought Derby, with some of the play, they looked like they were passing it a bit quicker. They looked like they were sort of moving it through the lines a little bit quicker. There just seemed to be a little bit more about Derby. Again, only in flashes, but we've seen it so many times where it's just knock it around the back and it's all a little bit one paced. I thought for periods of certainly of the first half, I thought Derby had got a little bit more vigour behind them. But and again, Leicester's league position is probably false. They've got multi-million pound players. They're out of the Premier League. We know how good they are. And again, for the majority of that game, did Derby look massively second best? I wouldn't say so, but did Derby really do enough when they again you go 1-0 down, anything could happen. They've done the hard bit in some respects, getting the equaliser as quickly as they can, and then the next 20 minutes is pretty much just yeah, it's like a training game, isn't it? There's not a great deal happen. And then you're away from home, you're in the game, you've almost quietened the crowd down. You've been obviously pegged back early, but you've managed to get it back in. Like Chris alluded to, teams who finish in this top half, top 10, top six, you've then got to start to sort of push on when you realise Leicester at the moment, if it's quality or it's just a form that they're in or whatever it is, they're not blistering. They didn't blow us apart. And Derby really need to get a stranglehold. And again, I think sometimes the midfield looked a little bit just not together. We'd obviously shuffled it about a little bit, and it looked a little bit disjointed. And then, of course, the one person at the moment who seems to be making things tick for Derby, Adjiman. I mean, he may as well. He could have been running around with slippers on, let alone football boots, because he just wasn't involved. Were we hitting him in enough? Or obviously, did Leicester just do the homework and realise that Derby are a little bit one-dimensional at the moment, and you nullify Adjiman, what else have Derby got? Somebody else has got to step up to the party. And of course, again, last night, just didn't look like it was the case. Joe Ward not there obviously makes a big difference on the right. Thought Langas did all right, if I'm honest. But of course he's not going to be able to go forward like Ward does. But he did put in a couple of juicy balls, I'll say that. So we know he's got a bit of crossing capability, but he's not a Joe Ward in terms of delivery. Last and of course, then we fall to a 2-1 defeat. I'm not that disappointed about the result. I thought Derby they did all right, but again, I think like Chris said, it's just games like this where it's clear that there's not a great deal between the teams. We've seen it too many times over the last 5 or 6 weeks. Derby just don't seem to have that next 10% to grab hold of the game and pick those points up like we were doing probably 2 months ago.
No, 100%. I mean, the game itself was such a non-entity, wasn't it? I mean, I I sat for about half an hour just thinking, what on earth do I write about this to get something out of it? The article, which will be out by the time this goes out, so I'm going to press publish once we finish recording. Uh, I've delved into the Foxes, of course, Leicester, the flat four as the 4-4-2, and of course Oscar Fraulo as well, because that news line saved me a little bit last night with such an uneventful game. But yeah, it's a good goal from Derby. Brewster holding his run to the right moment when that ball comes in from Elder. That was a good moment and something that stopped what, as you say, could have been a bit of a cricket score. And you know, based on the first game back at the start of the month, it could have been over quicker than the cricket has been down under of late as well. You consider as well that the other instance of Eustace's Derby playing on Marty Cifuentes' side was that 4-0 in Eustace's first game, and wow, the bar was low. But yeah, they get the equaliser, and what is so frustrating is just the way that eventual winner comes again. Thompson beaten in a foot race, bullied off the ball by Jordan James, uh, and no one else really is there. He just dinks it over the flailing leg of Matt Clark as he curls it in, really, doesn't he? And yeah, I just think the it kind of goes back to something we were talking about last week, where it almost feels more frustrating because again, it felt as though they were perhaps there for the taking, Leicester, if Derby could find another gear, because they weren't all that either. It was just such a nothing game. And you think if Derby had a Carlton Morris leading the line, for example, then does that bit of impetus, that bit of leadership, carry them over the line? You know, Eustace wants them to be braver in the build up. We keep hearing that, and yeah, I mean, Adjumang had 27 touches in 90 minutes, least of anyone to play the full game, and he was making stuff happen. I mean, chasing after lost causes at times. Do you remember that very optimistic ball out to the right from Brewster that he somehow chases after? But the shot again is just straight at the keeper, and you think it is these moments, and we are, as Chris said, relying on moments and someone pulling something out of nothing. So yeah, it's a frustrating one in the end. I do think one thing that was interesting last night with that shape is Langas at right back. He did all right. There were, as you say, a couple of nice moments. There's that one where he kind of knocked it past Thomas to cross with Brewster. That was relatively impressive. But I think we lost something not having him at centre back. I do wonder though, with those wide positions, could if Derby were to go to this formation again, would you see Joe Ward potentially higher up even? Could he play on the right flank? Meanwhile, Bobby Clark on the left, that seems to be the sort of thing that John Eustace envisioned for him when they signed him. And I do wonder whether the arrival of a midfielder, namely a certain Dane from Mönchengladbach, which I think I have now learned to spell over the last 24 hours, uh, could could unlock his attacking capabilities once more. But yeah, all in all, just one of those frustrating games because it felt like if Derby had say, just another gear, just a little bit more, it could have been very different. But ultimately, I don't know. It might just be where Derby are. The frustration is, of course, that it's where a lot of other teams are as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And you're right, there is a little bit of transfer news as it seemed to have broke over Twitter and then firmed up by BBC Radio Derby. We are going to touch more so on that in the next podcast. But yeah, it does look like Fraulo may well be on his way to Derby. Somebody obviously who was linked last season. And I have to say, somebody that when asked about last night in his post-match, John Eustace used the words, the club want him. Interesting to see if that's something that he wants. But we'll talk more transfers because we'll have a transfer special next week or in the next week or so. Let's look ahead to 2026 for the final 7 or 8 minutes of the pod, then, guys. All in all, December's been a little bit hit and miss from Derby. So back to back, what better way to try and not turn the season round, but sort of get it back on track? Two home games, obviously not going to be easy. Middlesbrough New Year's Day, followed by Wrexham on Sunday to end what you would class as the festive period before FA Cup action the week after. Um, Chris, it's quite simple. Derby's home form has just not been good enough this season, and fresh. I don't really know how footballers think about it, but it's 2026. It's the first home game, as I say, of the new year. You've just got to try and start and almost reset a little bit. We're close at that half. Well, we're at the halfway point now. Derby they need to do something different. We spoke about it, I think, last week. Derby's got to try something different at home, and you'd expect a pretty decent crowd on Saturday. Yes, okay, the opposition is tough, but one that, of course, when we was up at the Riverside, we put in a pretty solid account of ourselves. I felt Derby just need to do something different, and these next two games could really set up, the rest of this, well, the start of 2026 and the rest of the season, because the form just recently, and then especially the points, just haven't been what we would probably have hoped. For me, Derby can't go through the next two without winning one of them at least. So probably a big could be a big turning point in the season.
It could, because if it goes against what we want, we could be in the bottom six quite easily and looking below us rather than above us. I think Borough are a good time to play. They've lost two out of the last three, drawing one in the middle. Their form has dipped somewhat. Wrexham have won two on the bounce. So they're on their heels and starting to look upwards. What I will say is that I think the Leicester game highlighted one of the big problems Derby County have, which is impact. We have no impact off the bench whatsoever. Salverson came on, did absolutely nothing. Blackett Taylor came on and looked if he didn't give a hoot. He just looked not interested one bit. You know, I just feel that Derby need to start off well with the starting 11 and maintain a lead. Because one thing that we haven't seen for a long time now, guys, is score early and hold on to it or build from that. We're always seem to be on catch up or not able to, like Birmingham. We took the lead early, but we just, naivety cost us that. But 11 versus 11, I just can't remember since Morris went out of the team, we just are not able to solidify it and strengthen from early starts. If that happens, I think we can take Borough. I think Wrexham will be the more difficult game, to be honest, because we could have more bookings, we'd have more injuries. If Clark is not available for both, where do we go with creativity?
Yeah, fair point, Jack. What you hoping for? I suppose at these next two.
I mean, I think Chris is spot on. You've got to win one. I mean, it's funny how quickly what was a four-game unbeaten run before last night becomes, well, one win in seven. And that was Sheffield Wednesday, of course, who are, a team that everybody's expecting to beat this season. So you then look at these next couple of games, and now in form Leeds side of the Premier League and the FA Cup, and you think if you don't win one of these two games this week, how quickly does that become one win in 10? Potentially. So that is how things start to spiral. So something is needed, as Chris says. It's a good time to play Middlesbrough, and yeah, they're faltering now. Uh, only really, well, they're only 2 points clear of third place now after Ipswich beat Coventry last night. The wheels might be starting to come off a little bit there. So so yeah, I think it'd be an interesting battle. I think, yeah, creativity is the big concern. I do just wonder whether we might see the return of a Danny Barter or Curtis Nelson, because Matt Clark against his former club. I think if there's one centre back who's going to be dropped, it's probably him, because I think it goes back to the fact that he's a good headed kick it defender. He's dilly dallying too much on the ball, and it's putting Derby in trouble. So I think Middlesbrough, tough game, but yeah, not a bad time. And Wrexham, they're they're doing all right. They're 2 wins on the trot now. They just beat Preston, who are a solid side, and that will be a sneaky second screen job for me whilst in Loughborough with Derby women. So I don't really know how much that will take in, but hopefully, yeah, a win, because one win is certainly needed. If we get 6 points, then things start to look a bit different again. But because you're a point shy of that 1.5 points per game that I've kept banging on about. But yeah, it does feel like a little bit of a sliding doors moment.
Yeah, and just in time for the transfer window as well, where I think it is now clear to see this side. I think what Chris said is correct. There doesn't seem to be much impact. I think John probably knows that, and we say, why isn't Salverson playing more minutes? Why isn't Blackett Taylor having more minutes? Well, it could well be the reason is John Eustace just doesn't believe that they've got what it takes. So obviously, Caden Jackson into the starting lineup for Saturday for Thursday's game, and we'll have another goal off. He's 1 goal a year that he saves for Middlesbrough. We'll take that. And yeah, some fresh faces in January, and hopefully a bit of early business. Things could look a lot different, but yeah, like you say, it's very easy how quickly unbeaten in 4 flips to 1 win in 7. We are a bit of a yo-yo at the moment, and yes, Derby really need to get back on track. And as I say, with 2 home games, appreciate it's tough opposition, but with 2 home games, it does give them the opportunity to try and do that. And again, the fact that pretty much the same 11 are churned out and have done for this 8, 9 game stretch over 20 games. I appreciate it's probably the same for the others, but some clubs will have a little bit more rotation than what Derby's definitely had. We are maybe just seeing 1 or 2 of them slightly getting a little bit tired, a little bit fatigued, and yet a little bit of a freshen up might not be the end of the world if we can manage, dependent on injuries. Obviously, one final point. Lovely to see Lewis Travis back out there last night. We know that that's probably going to be another couple of weeks at least before we start to see him in a starting berth. We would expect, but still nice to have him back and another name off the injury table. And that is it for podcasting for 2025. Thank you very much for the year, gentlemen. And we'll be back next week to talk all about those 2 games at Pride Park. Enjoy the rest of your festive period. Chris, Jack, thank you very much, gentlemen.
Cheers, Jason. Cheers, Jack. Have a great new year.
Yes, no, happy New Year to everyone listening in advance. And yes, as well as those 2 games at Pride Park, as I say, trip to Loughborough for me on Sunday. So I don't know quite what the Wrexham content looks like, but we'll be back to take it all in with you next week.
Absolutely. Happy New Year and up the Rams.